When I met Ethan, he was the kind of guy who could walk into any room and make people laugh. He had this charm that made you feel like you were the only person he saw. I fell for that version of him, the one who held doors open, brought me coffee at work, and made me feel special. But it didn't take long to realize that everything he did came with an audience in mind. He loved attention more than he loved me. At first, it was little things. He'd tell jokes about me around his friends, things that seemed harmless. He'd say something like, "Rachel can't decide what to eat even with a whole menu," and everyone would laugh. I'd smile along, not wanting to make a scene. But as time went on, the jokes got sharper. They weren't funny anymore. They were meant to make me small. One night, we went out with his coworkers, and he joked about how I was lucky he put up with it. I remember the way they laughed, how he looked proud of himself for making me the punchline. I sat there smiling while something inside me started to fade. On the way home, I told him that it hurt when he said things like that. He rolled his eyes and said, "God, Rachel, you're too sensitive. It's just a joke." That night, I cried in the bathroom while he slept. I stared at myself in the mirror, wondering when I'd started letting someone treat me like that. I used to be confident, strong, and independent. Somewhere along the way, I'd started apologizing for existing too loudly. I thought maybe if I tried harder, if I made him happy, he'd go back to the person I fell for. But the truth was, that person never really existed. Ethan liked being seen as the strong, confident man. Making me the quiet, unsure girlfriend made him feel that way. It gave him power. He didn't notice that every cruel joke pushed me further away. He thought he was in control, that I'd always sit there smiling through the embarrassment. But he was wrong. I started keeping to myself more. I stopped reacting when he made fun of me. I watched him laugh with his friends, thinking he looked powerful, but all I saw was a man desperate for validation. I began to see the cracks, the way he needed to feel admired, the way he'd change his tone depending on who was watching. I stopped trying to fix things. I stopped defending myself. I started planning my way out quietly. Every joke, every insult became a reminder of who I didn't want to be anymore. He thought he had broken me, but what he really did was wake me up. He had no idea that the same girl he mocked in front of his friends was already planning the moment he'd lose everything he thought made him look strong. Ethan had this way of making me feel special and small at the same time. In private, he'd say sweet things like how lucky he was to have me. But when we were around other people, he turned into someone else, louder, cockier, and always ready with a joke at my expense. At first, I tried to laugh along. I didn't want to seem uptight or make things awkward. But slowly, those jokes started cutting deeper. He'd mock the way I dressed, saying things like, "You really think that outfit works for you?" And then grin when people chuckled. If I spoke about work, he'd interrupt, saying, "Rachel works in marketing," which basically means she posts cute stuff online all day. Everyone would laugh, and I'd just sit there wishing the ground would swallow me. The worst part was that he always acted like it was no big deal. "Relax," he'd say. "I'm just kidding. Don't make it weird." After a while, I stopped talking much when we went out. I became quieter, always second-guessing my words. If I laughed too loud, he'd tease me for being dramatic. If I stayed quiet, he'd say I was boring. I couldn't win. Every day felt like a test, and I never knew which version of him I was going to get. At home, things weren't much better. He'd make small comments that chipped away at me, like asking if I really thought I could handle a promotion at work, or telling me not to take life so seriously. He'd deliver these words with a smile, as if that made them harmless. But they weren't. They stuck to me like bruises I couldn't show anyone. I began to change without even realizing it. I'd spend extra time getting dressed, hoping he wouldn't make fun of me. I'd check my phone before sending him a text, worried he'd think I was being too clingy. I even avoided sharing my opinions because I knew he'd twist them into something for people to laugh at. It was exhausting. Sometimes I'd look at other couples, the way they seemed relaxed around each other, and wonder if that's how love was supposed to feel. With Ethan, I was always tense, always trying to stay one step ahead of his next sarcastic remark. I felt like a shadow of myself, someone who existed only to make him look good. Whenever I tried to talk about how his words hurt me, he'd turn it around. "You're overreacting," he'd say. "You really need to lighten up." And somehow, I'd end up apologizing for bringing it up. That was his pattern: make me feel small, then make me feel guilty for noticing. The relationship that once felt exciting started to feel like a trap. I wasn't laughing anymore. I was surviving quietly, hoping that maybe one day he'd see what he was doing to me. But deep down, I knew he never would, because hurting me made him feel powerful, and he wasn't ready to let that go. That Friday night started like any other. Ethan was unusually excited, straightening his tie in front of the mirror, and talking about how important this dinner was for his career. He wanted to make a good impression on his bosses, and I wanted to support him. I spent the afternoon getting ready, choosing a simple dress, doing my hair, trying to look my best. I remember hoping that maybe, just maybe, Tonight he would act like the man I first fell for. The restaurant was fancy, full of laughter and clinking glasses. Ethan introduced me to his colleagues with that confident smile he always wore. At first, things went smoothly. I smiled, made polite conversation, and tried to stay calm. Then one of his co-workers mentioned the homemade pie Ethan had brought to the last office event. "You're lucky, Ethan," the man said. "It must be nice having someone who can cook like that at home." Before I could even smile or say thank you, Ethan chuckled. "Oh, Rachel? She burns water. I do all the real cooking." His tone was playful, but it was sharp underneath, meant to get a laugh, and it worked. The whole table laughed. My stomach twisted. My hands went cold. I tried to laugh too, just to keep the moment light, but it came out weak and forced. For the rest of dinner, I barely spoke. Every time I tried, he found a way to interrupt, to make another small joke at my expense. I felt smaller and smaller with each word. The people around us didn't mean to be cruel. They were just following his lead, laughing along because he made it seem funny. But to me, it felt like being stripped bare in a room full of strangers. When dessert came, I sat quietly, pushing my plate around while Ethan kept talking, his voice loud, confident, full of himself. I couldn't stop thinking about how easy it was for him to use me as entertainment. The man who once held my hand like I was his whole world was now using me to get laughs from people he barely knew. On the way out, I stayed silent. In the car, I kept my eyes on the window. That's when he leaned closer, grinning, and whispered, "Lighten up, sweetheart. You're acting like I said something terrible." His voice was smooth, careless, the kind of tone people use when they know they've crossed a line and don't care. I didn't respond. My chest hurt too much to speak. He turned on the radio and started humming, like nothing had happened. But inside me, something shifted. I realized that no matter how much I loved him, I could never respect someone who enjoyed making me feel worthless. That night, while he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and made myself a quiet promise. It wasn't about revenge yet. It was about survival. I told myself that one day, I would walk away. And when I did, he would finally understand what losing respect really looked like. After that dinner, something inside me went quiet. I stopped waiting for Ethan to change, and I stopped hoping that he would treat me better. Instead, I started watching him closely. The way he talked, the way he needed people to laugh at his jokes, how his confidence only existed when someone else was smaller than him. It was like a mask he wore, and once I saw the cracks, I couldn't unsee them. He didn't like that I wasn't reacting anymore. My silence bothered him. He'd throw little comments my way, waiting for me to get upset, but I didn't give him the satisfaction. "What, no comeback?" he'd ask, smirking. I'd just smile faintly and change the subject. That small shift, me not feeding his ego, started to make him lose control. He tried harder to get a reaction. He'd question everything I did, from the way I cooked to how I dressed. Sometimes he'd joke that I was lucky he stuck around. But now, instead of feeling hurt, I felt detached. It was like watching a bad movie I'd already seen too many times. I knew every line, every expression, and I knew exactly how it would end. The breaking point came one Saturday when we went out to dinner with another couple, his old college friend and his girlfriend. It was supposed to be a relaxed evening. We all laughed and talked for a while, and for a moment it felt normal. Then Ethan decided to make things interesting. He started telling stories about our relationship, exaggerating details, twisting things to make me sound foolish. At one point, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Yeah, Rachel's kind of like my emotional support project. She's come a long way though, haven't you, babe?" The table laughed. My heart sank, but I didn't let it show. I just smiled, looked him straight in the eye, and said calmly, "You always did like fixing things that were never broken." That shut him up for a second. He forced a laugh, but it came out awkward. Ava glanced at me and then at him. I could tell she saw it too. For the rest of the night, I kept my composure. I smiled, I made conversation, and I didn't let his words touch me. Inside, I was done. Not angry, not sad, just done. I realized then that he wasn't strong. He was terrified. Every insult, every joke, was just his way of keeping control because deep down, he knew he didn't deserve the kind of love I gave him. That night, when we got home, he acted like nothing had happened. But as I watched him talk, I realized I didn't see the same person anymore. I saw a man who needed to tear others down just to feel tall. I didn't say anything to him, not yet. I simply smiled, tucked myself into bed, and let my plan form in silence. I knew it was time to stop surviving him and start outsmarting him. While Ethan kept wasting his energy trying to look important, I was quietly building something real. At work, I'd been leading a project that could make or break my career, a partnership between my company and a major client. I spent late nights at the office, not because I wanted to escape him, but because I was finally investing in something that would outlast the mess I was living in. Ethan didn't have a clue. He thought I was just putting in extra hours to look busy, as he liked to call it. He didn't realize I was about to take a step that would change everything. Every day, he'd keep bragging about how he was the man of the house and how his job paid for everything. It was almost funny, the way he needed to remind everyone that he was in charge. When his friends came over, he'd throw in little lines like, "Rachel's job is cute, but I'm the real breadwinner here." I'd just smile and keep quiet, pretending not to care. Inside, I was calm. I knew what was coming. My boss had hinted that if our project succeeded, there was a good chance I'd be promoted to senior project director, a position that came with a huge raise and recognition across the company. It wasn't just about money. It was about finally being seen for my hard work. For once, I wanted to succeed quietly, without explaining or defending myself to anyone, especially not Ethan. I didn't tell him a thing. Every time he asked about my day, I gave short answers. It was fine, I'd say, and change the subject. He wasn't interested anyway. He liked talking about his own achievements, even when they weren't that big. He'd brag about meetings that never led anywhere, about people who barely remembered his name. At night, while he scrolled through his phone or watched TV, I'd sit beside him with my laptop, pretending to do boring work stuff. What I was really doing was finalizing proposals, preparing presentations, and planning for the big meeting that could define my future. The contrast between us couldn't have been clearer. He was wasting time proving he was successful, while I was quietly becoming successful. As the day of the presentation got closer, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: confidence. Not the kind Ethan had, built on ego and attention, but the kind that comes from knowing you've earned your place. Every time he made another joke about me, it only fueled me more. His words no longer hurt, they motivated me. He still had no idea what was coming. 2 weeks from then, everything would shift. The woman he mocked in front of others would be standing in a room full of people, being recognized for her hard work and talent. And when that happened, Ethan would finally see what true strength looked like. Not loud, not cruel, but steady and undeniable. I didn't need to humiliate him the way he did me. All I had to do was succeed, and that alone would be enough to break his illusion. The night of the charity gala felt different from the start. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, but I didn't tell Ethan why. He thought it was just another fancy work event, another chance for him to show off and impress people who didn't really care about it. When I told him I had an extra invitation, he jumped at the chance to come. He spent an hour picking out his suit, checking his reflection, and talking about how he was going to make connections. I stayed quiet, letting him believe whatever he wanted. When we arrived, the ballroom was glowing, soft lights, elegant music, people in suits and gowns mingling with glasses of champagne. Ethan instantly switched into his charming mode. He shook hands, laughed loudly, and introduced himself like he was the star of the evening. I watched him work the room, bragging about his job, trying to fit in. He had no idea that tonight wasn't about him. I kept close to my colleagues, chatting and smiling, but inside my heart was racing. I knew what was coming, though no one else did. My boss had told me earlier that week that the announcement would be made during the main presentation. I'd acted surprised and grateful, but mostly, I'd felt a quiet satisfaction. Not pride in proving anyone wrong, but relief in proving something to myself. As dinner started, the speeches began. Ethan leaned over at one point and whispered, "These events always drag on. At least the food's good." I just smiled. He didn't realize that every minute brought us closer to the moment his arrogance would crumble. Then my boss stepped up to the microphone. He thanked everyone for coming, talked about the company's success, and then paused. "Tonight," he said, "I want to recognize someone whose hard work and dedication helped us secure a partnership worth over $1 million. Please give a round of applause to our newest senior project director, Rachel Miller." For a moment, everything went quiet in my head. Then I heard the applause, loud, warm, real. People stood, clapping, smiling at me. I could barely breathe, but I stood, smiling back, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. It felt like sunlight after years of gray. And then I looked at Ethan. His smile had completely disappeared. He sat there frozen, his hand still holding his fork, his eyes darting between me and my boss like he couldn't process what was happening. The confident man who always needed to be the center of attention suddenly looked lost. After the announcement, everyone wanted to talk to me, not him. Colleagues who'd barely noticed me before came up to say how proud they were. Ethan tried to join a few conversations, but people were focused on me. He stood awkwardly, pretending to check his phone, the charm gone from his face. That night, I didn't rub it in or make any speeches. I didn't need to. Watching him realize that the woman he'd tried to keep beneath him was now standing above him, that was enough. It was quiet, dignified, and powerful. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small. I felt seen, capable, and completely free. After my name was announced, the room shifted. For the first time in a long while, all eyes were on me. Not because someone made a joke about me, not because I was someone's +1, but because I had earned it. People came over with smiles, shaking my hand, asking questions about the project, wanting to know how I pulled it off. I could barely keep up with all the congratulations, but every word felt like a reminder that my hard work had been worth it. Ethan stood a few feet away, his expression tight. He tried to join the conversations at first, but every time he opened his mouth, someone would turn back to me to ask something. It was subtle, but I could see it, the discomfort, the way his confidence slipped away piece by piece. He wasn't used to being the one in the background. He'd always needed the attention to feel important, and now it was gone. At one point, a senior executive shook my hand and said, "Rachel, your presentation was brilliant. You really saved that deal." Ethan tried to laugh and add, "Yeah, I kept her sane through it all," but no one even responded. They just kept talking to me. I could feel his irritation rising, though he tried to hide it behind a forced smile. I stayed calm, polite, and focused on the people around me. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The silence that followed him wherever he went said everything. When the gala ended, we walked to the car in silence. He didn't open the door for me like he usually did when he wanted to look good in front of others. His jaw was tight, his movements sharp. As soon as we were inside, he exploded. "You just had to make me look stupid in front of everyone, didn't you?" he said, his voice shaking with anger. I turned to him, surprised by how calm I felt. "I didn't embarrass you, Ethan," I said quietly. "You did that all on your own." He scoffed. "Oh, come on. You think you're better than me now? You couldn't just let me have this one night." I looked out the window for a second before answering. "You've had every night, Ethan. You've had every laugh, every spotlight, every moment at my expense. Tonight wasn't about you. It was finally about me." He didn't respond. The only sound was the hum of the car and his uneven breathing. I could feel the shift in power between us. It wasn't about revenge or pride. It was about finally standing where I belonged. When we got home, he slammed the door behind him and muttered something under his breath. I didn't follow. I walked upstairs, took off my shoes, and looked at myself in the mirror. For once, I didn't see someone trying to be enough for someone else. I saw a woman who had taken back her power without shouting, without fighting, just by being exactly who she was meant to be. Later, when he came into the room still fuming, I looked at him and said softly, "Now you know how it feels." He didn't answer. He just stood there, realizing that for the first time, the silence wasn't mine, it was his. After that night, everything between us changed. Ethan tried to act like nothing had happened, but I could feel the tension every time he walked into the room. His usual arrogance was replaced with silence. The man who once loved showing me off now avoided my eyes. He didn't know how to handle the fact that people respected me for something real, not for being his girlfriend, but for being me. Over the next few days, I started hearing things from people we both knew. His friends, the same ones who used to laugh at his jokes about me, had started keeping their distance from him. One of them, Tyler, ran into me at a coffee shop. He hesitated for a second before saying, "Hey, Rachel, I just wanted you to know you didn't deserve the way he treated you. We all saw how he used to talk to you. It wasn't right." For a moment, I didn't even know how to respond. I just nodded and said, "Thank you." It was strange hearing that from someone who used to laugh along with Ethan, but it made sense. People like Ethan rely on others not seeing the truth, but once the mask slips, there's no going back. I didn't tell Ethan about that conversation. There was no point. He'd already started to feel the consequences of his own behavior. His friends stopped inviting him to hangouts as often. The group chats went quiet. The attention he craved so badly wasn't there anymore. He must have realized that without someone to make fun of, his jokes didn't land the same way. He tried reaching out to me a few times, calls, texts, even an email. The first message was short, "Can we talk?" The second one was longer, filled with excuses and half apologies. "I didn't mean to hurt you. You took things too seriously. I just want to fix this." I stared at the words for a long time, but I never replied. I had no interest in rehashing old pain or explaining what he already knew. It wasn't anger that kept me from answering. It was peace. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed him anything. Not a reaction, not forgiveness, not my time. I had already spent too much of myself trying to make him see my worth. Now, I didn't need him to see it. I already knew it myself. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking about how different things felt. My home was quiet now, but it was the kind of quiet that felt safe. I could cook dinner without being mocked, laugh without fear of being told I was too much, and rest without waiting for the next insult wrapped as a joke. Ethan became just another lesson, proof that people who build their confidence on tearing others down eventually collapse under the weight of their own insecurity. And as for me, I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I had my peace, and that was something he could never take back. It had been several weeks since I last saw Ethan. Life had settled into something calm and beautiful. I was busy with my new role at work, spending time with people who actually cared about me, and most of all, learning how to enjoy my own company. I didn't think about him much anymore. The anger, the pain, they had all faded into quiet acceptance. He had become a closed chapter in my story. One afternoon, I stopped by a cafe near my office. It was the same one we used to visit sometimes, back when things were still good between us, or at least when I believed they were. I walked in to grab my usual coffee, and that's when I saw him, Ethan, sitting alone at a corner table. He looked different, not in the way people change their style, but in the way someone looks when life humbles them. His shoulders were slouched, his expression tired. There was no spark of arrogance in his eyes anymore, no smirk waiting to belittle someone. He noticed me almost immediately, his eyes widening just a little. "Rachel," he said, standing up slowly, as if unsure if he should even approach me. I could have ignored him, but I didn't feel any bitterness anymore. I gave him a polite smile. He looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his cup before saying, "You look good, Ratch." I nodded, keeping my tone light. "Thanks. Confidence suits me, doesn't it?" He hesitated for a second, then nodded quietly. "Yeah, it really does." The silence that followed said more than either of us could. For the first time, I wasn't the nervous one. I wasn't the one trying to please him or prove my worth. I stood there calm, collected, and unbothered. He looked at me the way someone looks at something they once had, but didn't know how to keep. He tried to make small talk, asking how work was going. I told him things were great, busy, but fulfilling. When I mentioned my recent project's success, he smiled faintly, but there was a flicker of regret in his eyes. The kind that comes when someone realizes the person they took for granted outgrew them. I didn't stay long. I had things to do, people to meet, and a life that didn't revolve around him anymore. Before leaving, I simply said, "Take care, Ethan." He looked like he wanted to say something more, but no words came out. I walked away feeling light, not because I had won some battle, but because I no longer needed his validation. As I stepped outside, the sunlight felt warm against my skin. I thought about all the times he had made me feel small, unworthy, invisible. But standing there, I realized I had reclaimed everything he tried to take from me. My voice, my confidence, my peace. That was my revenge. Not anger, not payback. Just becoming everything he said I couldn't be, without him. Looking back now, everything feels so distant, like a story that happened to someone else. There was a time when I couldn't go a day without replaying every cruel word Ethan said. Every time he made me feel small. But now I think of those moments differently. They don't hurt anymore. They remind me how far I've come, how much I've grown, and how strong I've become because of it all. When I think about revenge, I realize I never really wanted to destroy him. That kind of revenge only keeps you tied to the person who hurt you. What I wanted was to heal, to build a life so peaceful, so full, that his memory no longer had power over me. And I did. My victory wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and steady, the kind that happens when you wake up one day and realize you don't need to prove anything anymore. Ethan embarrassed me to make himself feel powerful, but his strength was built on weakness. He wanted control because he lacked it inside himself. I see that clearly now. Every insult, every laugh at my expense, it was just him trying to cover his own insecurities. He thought I'd break, but all he did was teach me how to rebuild myself, piece by piece, stronger than before. There was a time I thought I'd never be the same again, that the shame he caused would follow me forever. But healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small, quiet moments. In choosing to walk away instead of argue. In staying silent instead of begging to be understood. In learning that peace is worth more than revenge. Now my life feels calm. I've surrounded myself with people who lift me up, who value kindness over pride. My work gives me purpose, my friends bring me laughter, and my own company feels enough. I'm not angry at Ethan anymore. If anything, I'm grateful. Because without his cruelty, I might have never discovered what I was capable of. I sometimes see couples laughing in cafes or walking hand in hand, and I smile, not because I miss what I had, but because I finally understand what love should look like. Mutual respect, compassion, and safety. Not humiliation disguised as humor. Not control masked as care. I used to think I needed someone like Ethan to make me feel special. Now I know I just needed myself. Revenge isn't always about making them pay. Sometimes it's about rising so high that they can't reach you anymore. That's what true power looks like. Not shouting louder, but standing taller. Ethan once tried to take my confidence from me, but that same pain became the reason I built a stronger version of myself. So yes, he may have embarrassed me once, but I turned that humiliation into strength. And that's the kind of victory that lasts forever. Broken heart sparkles.